Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something a little different today.
Always up for a challenge.
Great. We're cracking open Stephen Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO.
Bartlett. Always thought-provoking.
He really is. We're looking at Law 25, the power of negative manifestation. Heard of it?
Definitely rings a bell. It's that idea of using negative thinking to make better decisions, right?
Exactly. Instead of just focusing on why things will go right, we're going to explore why they might go wrong.
Interesting. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I'm intrigued.
Me too. So what exactly does Bartlett mean by negative manifestation? Is he saying we should all become pessimists?
Not at all. It's not about pessimism, but about being realistic. It's about acknowledging that things can and often do go wrong.
Okay, I see. So instead of just assuming everything will be perfect, we're looking at potential pitfalls. Makes sense.
Right. And Bartlett highlights how much we tend to avoid thinking about failure. Like, he surveyed over 1,000 startup founders.
Wow, that many. What did he find?
Only a tiny fraction, something like 6%, were clear on why their idea could fail. The vast majority were totally fixated on why it would succeed.
Fascinating. It's almost like we're wired to ignore the possibility of failure. Why do you think that is?
Well, Bartlett points to some psychological biases that come into play. He identifies 5 main culprits.
5. Okay, let's hear them.
First up is optimism bias. Basically, our tendency to focus on the positive and downplay the negative.
Ah, the rose-colored glasses syndrome. We've all been there.
Then there's confirmation bias, where we seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs.
That's me all over. Especially online, it's so easy to just see what you already agree with.
And social media algorithms don't help either, creating those echo chambers.
True. Okay, what about the other biases?
Well, there's self-serving bias, where we take credit for successes but blame external factors for failures.
It's easier on the ego that way, right?
Exactly. And it prevents us from learning from our mistakes.
Okay, what else?
The sunk cost fallacy. That's when you stick with a bad decision because you've already invested so much time, money, or energy.
Oh, I know that one all too well. It's like throwing good money after bad, hoping things will magically turn around.
And Bartlett admits to falling prey to this himself with his first business venture, Wallpark. He put years and lots of investor money into it.
Even when it was clear it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it's hard to let go when you're emotionally invested.
Totally. Okay, so that's 4 biases. What's the last one?
The last one is groupthink, where a group prioritizes harmony and consensus over critical thinking.
So even if someone has doubts, they don't speak up.
Right. They go along with the group to avoid conflict.
And that can lead to some bad decisions, especially in business.
Absolutely. And Bartlett believes this tendency to avoid uncomfortable conversations is a major obstacle to success. He actually
thinks what? They'll leave me hanging.
He thinks that the ability to handle those tough conversations is a key predictor of success in life.
Interesting. So how did Bartlett himself learn to embrace this negative thinking? Any aha moments for him?
There's a great story about how he almost launched this huge podcast network. Seemed like a surefire win, you know?
Yeah, especially with his own podcast doing so well.
Exactly. But then, at a crucial moment, he flipped the script and asked his team, why is it a bad idea?
Wow, I bet that changed the whole dynamic. What happened?
At first, some hesitation. Then, people started voicing concerns they hadn't considered before. Like, what if this new network actually hurt their existing podcasts?
I see. Spreading themselves too thin.
Yeah, and they worried about relying on celebrity hosts who might be flaky and the potential impact of an economic downturn.
So just by asking that one question, why is this a bad idea, Bartlett opened up this whole new way of thinking.
And they ultimately decided to scrap the network and focus on their existing podcast.
Good call, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah. Their podcast blew up. 900% increase in audience size the next year, and a 300% revenue increase.
Talk about a testament to the power of focus. So this experience really solidified his belief in negative thinking.
Absolutely. It was a turning point, and it led him to develop a more structured approach, which he calls the Pre-Mortem Method.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What's this pre-mortem all about?
Basically, imagine you're conducting an autopsy, but before the project even starts.
Like a metaphorical autopsy? That's pretty intense.
It is. You're not just asking what could go wrong. You're fast-forwarding to the future and saying, okay, this project failed. What happened?
So it's about figuring out potential causes of failure before they even occur.
Exactly. And research actually shows that groups using the pre-mortem method are way more accurate in predicting outcomes.
Wow, that's impressive. So how do we actually de-do this pre-mortem thing? Is there a process?
There is. Bartlett lays out a 5-step process, and it can be applied to anything, not just business decisions.
All right, I'm all ears. What's step one?
First, you set the stage. Gather your team, or even just yourself if you're doing this solo, and explain the purpose.
Yeah.
It's not about blaming anyone, it's about uncovering potential problems.
Got it. So fostering open communication, no finger pointing. What's next?
Step 2 is where it gets interesting. You imagine the project has completely failed. Like, really visualize it. What went wrong? What are the consequences? Get specific.
Okay, so facing our fears head on. Then what?
Then, everyone independently brainstorms reasons for that failure, both internal and external factors.
So basically a comprehensive list of everything that could possibly go wrong.
You got it. And it's important to do it independently at first to avoid groupthink.
It makes sense. Then what? We share our doomsday lists.
Exactly. Step 4 is all about discussing those risks openly and honestly. Again, no blame, just trying to understand the potential problem.
Crucial step. So we've identified the risks, talked about them. What's the final step?
In step 5, you create contingency plans based on those risks. You're basically saying, okay, if this happens, here's what we'll do.
Like a plan B or even a plan C. Love it. This is turning negative thinking into positive action.
That's the power of the pre-mortem. You identify potential problems and proactively address them.
This has been fascinating. It's definitely challenging how I think about decision-making, not just in business, but in life too.
It really applies to everything.
This feels like just the beginning. Is there more to uncover about this negative manifestation?
Oh, definitely. We've only just scratched the surface. Bartlett argues this approach can be applied to all sorts of life choices, not just business.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. Tell me more.
We'll dive into that after a quick break. Stay tuned to see how this powerful tool can apply to everything, from picking a career to making major life decisions.
All right, so we were talking about how this negative manifestation can actually be used for our personal lives, not just for business.
Right, it's not just about companies and bottom lines, it's about our own life choices.
Exactly. And those come with even bigger risks, I'd say. So how would we use this pre-mortem for, let's say, choosing a career?
Okay, imagine you're trying to decide between 2 different career paths, right?
Yeah, that classic dilemma.
Instead of just focusing on what you think you'd enjoy,
Which is what most people do, probably.
you could do a pre-mortem on each option. Picture yourself 5 years down the road, completely unhappy in that career.
Oof, that's a scary thought.
But think about it. Why are you unhappy? What went wrong? Maybe one path offers 0 growth, or the work-life balance is unsustainable.
And the other path might be more fulfilling, but means making some tough sacrifices.
Exactly. It's about bringing those potential downsides to the front of your mind before you make the leap.
It's like looking into a future of regret and using that to guide your choices, NW.
That's a great way to put it.
I'm also thinking about relationships. We all hope for the best, but statistically, a lot of them don't last. Could this pre-mortem help us choose partners better?
Absolutely. Picture yourself years down the line, the relationship has fallen apart. What were those red flags you missed? What were the deal breakers?
You know, this makes me think about past relationships where I definitely ignored some warning signs.
We all have those moments, right?
If I'd done this pre-mortem thing, maybe I would have seen them more clearly.
It's not about being cynical, but being honest with yourself about those potential problems.
I think we often avoid these tough conversations because we don't want to jinx things.
It's like if we don't acknowledge the possibility of failure, it won't happen.
Right. But Bartlett says the real jinx is not having those conversations.
It's like sweeping problems under the rug and then being surprised when they trip you up later.
Makes sense. So it's about being prepared, not paralyzed.
Yeah.
How about another example, like a big financial decision?
Perfect. Imagine you're thinking about buying a house, a huge financial commitment for most people.
Definitely a big one.
Before jumping in, do that pre-mortem. Imagine yourself years later struggling with mortgage payments, maybe facing foreclosure. Ask yourself what went wrong.
This is making me anxious just thinking about it.
But it forces you to really think about your finances, do your research, consider all the potential downsides.
So careers, relationships, finances. Is there anywhere this pre-mortem isn't helpful?
Honestly, I think it applies to almost any major life decision. Where you live, whether to have kids, even things like going back to school or starting a business.
Wow, so it's really about using negative thinking to make more informed choices.
And ultimately, to have more satisfaction and success in all areas of your life.
This is really eye-opening. It's like Bartlett's giving us this superpower to see into the future and learn from hypothetical mistakes.
It's about challenging our assumptions and asking those tough questions, even if they're uncomfortable.
This has been so insightful. But is there a risk of taking this too far? Could we get so caught up in what could go wrong that we become afraid to do anything?
That's a really great question, and it's definitely something to be aware of. We don't want to become so risk-averse that we never take any chances.
So how do we find that balance?
Yeah.
How do we use negative thinking without becoming completely pessimistic?
That's the real art of it, and that's what we'll unpack next.
So we were talking about how we could end up overthinking things and getting paralyzed by all the what-ifs.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. We don't want to become so risk-averse that we never take any chances or pursue those big dreams.
Right. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging potential risks and still having the courage to take action.
Exactly. It's not about becoming a pessimist or letting fear control your choices. It's about using this negative thinking strategically.
So negative thinking is a tool for making better decisions, not a weapon to use against ourselves.
I like that. A tool, not a weapon. Think of it like planning a trip. You might check the weather and see if there's a chance of rain.
So you pack an umbrella just in case.
Right, but you don't cancel the whole trip because of a little rain cloud.
That's a great way to think about it. Be prepared, not paralyzed. So how do we cultivate that balance?
Yeah.
How do we keep negative thinking from taking over?
Awareness is key. Our brains have this natural negativity bias. It's wired to focus on threats and problems. It's a survival mechanism, really.
So evolutionarily speaking, it makes sense.
Exactly. But when you find yourself spiraling into all those what-ifs, remember, your brain might be exaggerating the likelihood of those bad things actually happening.
So we need to fact-check our own thoughts. Make sure we're not letting our negativity bias run wild.
Right. And don't just dwell on the problems. Focus on solutions, too. Once you've used the pre-mortem to spot those potential risks, shift your energy to figuring out how to mitigate them.
So instead of, what if this happens, it's, how can I prepare for this?
Exactly. Turn those what-ifs into action steps.
And even if things don't go perfectly, even if we encounter setbacks, those are all valuable learning experiences.
Yes, that's right. It's often through those challenges that we build resilience, resourcefulness, and a deeper understanding of ourselves.
It's like they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. But sometimes it's hard to see those lessons when you're in the middle of a tough situation.
It's easy to get caught up in those feelings of failure.
But that's where the real power of negative manifestation comes in. You acknowledge those negative feelings, you process them, and then you use them as fuel to learn, adapt, and come back stronger.
So it's about using those negative emotions to our advantage instead of letting them control us.
Right. Remember what Bartlett said. You can predict someone's success by observing how willing and capable they are at dealing with uncomfortable conversations.
That really sums it up perfectly. It's about embracing discomfort, challenging assumptions, and having those tough conversations.
Both with ourselves and with others. It's about being open to learning from our mistakes.
This has been such an amazing exploration of negative manifestation. It's really changed how I think about success and failure.
Me too. And I hope it's been helpful for our listeners as well.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a challenge. Think about something you're working on right now. Instead of just focusing on why it will succeed, take a moment to ask yourself, why might this fail? Embrace that discomfort, explore those what-if scenarios, and use that knowledge to make better, smarter choices.
And remember, even if you hit some bumps along the way, those are all valuable learning experiences. Embrace the power of negative thinking, use it wisely, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic to explore. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep embracing the power of negative thinking.